Hello, it is Lucas from ChemKnits, and we're going to dye some Speckle-tastic yarn with sprinkles!
That's right! Today we are going to dye some yarn with sprinkles. And wait, who am I?
Rebecca from ChemKnits.
I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and Lucas and I together are going to dye some beautiful speckled yarn using...
Sprinkles! I did it once with my class.
Yeah, here, can you take this? Gentle because it's glass. And don't tip it because it'll spill everywhere. What colors, can you hold the sprinkles up high so people can see? These are sugar sprinkles that often are used on cookies and things like that. What colors do you see in there?
Pink, red, I think there's an orange, yellow, green, and purple.
Lucas, do you want to use all of the colors or some of the colors?
All of them except for blue.
Well, right, because blue is missing. That's right. Today we are going to do a dyeing experiment using sugar sprinkles. And I thought it would be fun to do a combination for this speckling technique. In one case, we're going to mix all the colors together and use that mixture to dye the yarn. And in the other, we're going to layer all the colors on top of one another individually.
Here's the yarn for today.
Yes. Today we are going to be using KnitPicks Stroll fingering weight yarn. This yarn is 75% Superwash Merino, 25% Nylon. Since this yarn is Superwash, it'll show off the speckles really nicely. Non-Superwash yarn tends to have the color strike slower, so you won't get as sharp specks. Lucas, do you know the 4 things that you need to dye yarn with food coloring?
Yarn, food coloring, a pan, and water.
Well, actually, that's all true, and
a stove.
Yeah, those are actually all true, and not quite the 4 things I usually list, but are all very true. So the 4 things you need to make sure you combine are heat, and there's our stove. You need the food coloring, which will be in our sugar sprinkles. You need your yarn, and the last thing you need is acid. So you need acidic conditions for the food coloring to strike to the yarn.
Very cool.
Yes. But when it comes to the yarn, you really need a protein-based yarn. So like wool, silk, other animal fibers, because this technique will not work on cotton, other plant fibers, or acrylic and polyester. So a superwash wool isn't ideal, but a lot of other like alpaca and things might work. Just maybe you won't get as sharp speckles with this technique. Can we go and start adding the sprinkles on the yarn right now?
Yes, let's go.
Well, okay, but is there something we need to do to the yarn before
we wash?
Yes, we need to wet the yarn. So whenever I talk about the 4 things, I don't usually talk about the water. Technically, a lot of times you can start with the yarn dry, so water is optional, but to dye the yarn, it does need to at some point and somehow get wet. Thanks, Lucas. Let's go to it. This water here started as 6 to 18 cups of water with 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. I don't often use vinegar in a pre-soak, but since we're going low immersion and the water that's in our pan came from this pre-soak originally anyway, I figured we may as well just use this. In general, I often like to pre-soak for 20 to 30 minutes, but today we'll probably do shorter than that. You just need to make sure the yarn is wet, and if you want more even coverage, you want to soak it for longer. But since we're going for speckles, even coverage is not part of the plan. I've just stored these sprinkles into some salt and pepper shakers, but I actually don't use these a lot for applying speckles to yarn, because I find even though you can get some light coverage, I often like to go heavier. We might use these when we do them one at a time, but I do want to create a mixture of all the colors in this bowl.
And I will be helping with that.
Absolutely. So why don't you start adding some of each of these colors to the bowl so we end up with a rainbow mixture. We could have taken measuring spoons and measured out equal amounts of each color, but what's the fun in that? We had fun adding the colors, looking at the balance, and then deciding what colors we needed to add more of all together.
This is our color mixture. Well, how do you like the sprinkling color? We tried mixing it together, but we didn't get that much purple. There is very few specks of it. And
actually, I think there's a fair amount of purple. But the thing that is going to be fun with this is that
we're going to jump it over the yarn.
Yeah, pretty much. Except rather than dump, we'll sort of like sprinkle it on. But the fun thing that's going to be different is when we sprinkle on some of this mixture
we'll
versus
squirt it in squirt guns.
We're not using squirt guns today. But I think my hypothesis is that when we use the mixture, we'll sort of get rainbowy speckles all over the yarn. And we'll have rainbowy colors when we layer them on top of each other, but it might not feel as mixed up. They might feel a little different. And so that is the idea we're testing.
Uh-huh. Now, this is the color mixture after I finish pressing it down.
Okay, thank you. Why don't you go wash your hands now?
Okay, well. Okay. See you later. La 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 la.
Here is my steam pan that has just a few cups of water in it. There's probably, honestly, some sugar in it as well because I was filming another sugar sprinkles video. We only need one skein right now, honey. I'm removing the yarn from the pre-soak. This is the first skein. I did add a removable nylon zip tie. I like using them as extra ties. And especially when kids are involved, sometimes things could end up getting tangly, huh?
Mixed.
Mixed. So I'm spreading it out as much as possible, but we are true low immersion. There is not a ton of excess water in here. So now I'm going to turn on the stove. And so we can get this hot, which will just take a few minutes, and then we'll start adding on that multicolored mixture that Lucas made.
La la la!
I am now going to reduce the heat so it's not as steamy. And this is what we're gonna do, and I'll show over there because this pan can get hot, so you wanna be careful, okay? One of the best things about dyeing yarn with food coloring is that it's kitchen safe. And so this happens to be a dedicated dye pan I don't use for food, but since we're dealing with food coloring, Lucas can dye along with me. So what you wanna do is take a tiny pinch and then add it onto the yarn. There, that's great. But you don't want it to be too heavy in one spot. You wanna kind of spread it out. So add a little bit at a time. There you go. So don't just throw, honey. That's a little too heavy. You want to, so think about like it's salt on your food. Do you want to just dump the salt? You add like a tiny bit. There you go.
And spread it around.
Yep. Why don't you focus on the area near you and I'll do the one further away. Oh man. So yeah, some heaviness is fine, but we want to make sure that there's going to be enough for us to add color to the other side as well.
We've got the rest of the sprinkles for that.
Well, I'm also going to use those sprinkles because I'm going to add a little bit of each of those colors on top of each other, which should be fun.
That's true.
Okay, but don't go too heavy. Thank you so much for helping me, kiddo. Mommy likes it when you come and join in. All right, so hold on. Will you let Mama finish this up? Thank you. Right now I'm focusing a little bit on these edges. All right, honey. Thank you, Lucas. All right, that's good. That's good. I'm gonna zoom people in to see. But I would say that looking at this right now, a few colors dominate. Lucas, what colors do you see?
I see a brilliant blue and some...
Wait, you see blue?
I mean, sort of over there.
Oh, yep, there is one speck of blue. But what other colors do you see on the yarn? What colors do you see the most of?
I see giant orange spots and yellow spots. Maybe we need a little bit more green.
Oh, okay, honey. Thank you. We don't need to add more yarn right now. But so that's actually a good point. Do you see a lot of green in here?
That's right. No.
Yeah, so the green sprinkles don't have a lot of pigment. So we're mostly seeing yellow, which it's really hard for you to see on camera.
Orange.
Yes, I guess you mostly see the purple, the pink, the red, and the orange.
And maybe a tiny speck of blue.
Yes, a tiny speck of blue maybe, and there's some hits of yellow, but yellow is way, way, way more subtle. But right now, I see like one green spot, like over there, but otherwise I'm not seeing a ton of green. I think the green is so yellowish that maybe actually those yellow specks that we're seeing could actually be the green ones. I don't know. Now,
this is our color scheme, and we're gonna flip it over and do a more.
yes, so we're gonna wait like a minute or two. These colors are probably pretty well set, but we are gonna wait just a tiny bit before we flip it over to add more sprinkles to the other side. And when I'm pulled back like this, I'm not sure how well you really can see it, but I promise those speckles are there.
It's time to flip.
Yep, it's time to flip the yarn over. Now the thing that you'll probably notice right now is that there's not very much color on the other side at all. And that is because these sprinkles aren't very pigmented, and so then the color that you get is very shallow. But so now we want to try to, again, spread things out as much as possible. And we are going to sprinkle onto the yarn. Luke, do you have any questions?
Is it time to sprinkle?
Yes, it is.
I'll get the ball to do the...
Oh, thank you. All right. Okay.
It's time for sprinkling.
Now remember, don't go too messy, because what do you think might like these sprinkles?
An ant.
That's right. And so do we want them all over the house?
Looking for sprinkles.
That's right. We don't want that. But the nice thing is that we will be able to wash out all of the sugar from the yarn, so it's not a concern. You won't have ants coming after your yarn if you wash it well after the fact. It's just I don't want to spill sprinkling sugar all over my house.
Ants. Be careful when you do this. Ants are on the move.
No, you don't need to worry about ants. All right, kiddo, I think, you know what? There might be, do you see any places that look like there's no color at all? Before, okay, thank you. Why don't you point to some places?
Like in that spot there.
Oh, this is good.
I sort of see some blue.
Yes, so the reason why you see some blue in some places is because the purple has some blue in it. So sometimes the way that it falls on the yarn, you might see that blue. But I think there's a tiny bit left, but I think we're gonna move the yarn one more time. We're gonna wait a few more minutes, watch a little bit more of that Minecraft video, and then we'll come and add more sprinkles.
See you later.
So, kiddo, oh, put the bowl down. Thank you. So what do you think of the colors so far?
Awesome, amazing though.
Awesome, amazing-o. Aha, but see, flipping it, even with it super spread out, what do we see? Do we see some areas that did not...
Need sprinkling.
Yes. Hold on, kiddo, hold on, okay? Put the sprinkles back down. All right, yes, we need more sprinkles, but Mommy is trying to look and spread out and seeing where else there might need to get more color, okay? So we want to spread it out. All right, now we want to add color like in that little area right there, okay?
I'll get a lot and
No, a little at a time.
And mix it up like that.
Look, honey, a little at a time, because we don't want to run out. Because we can't make more. We can make more mixture, but since we didn't measure, we can't make more of this exact mixture. No, honey, take a little pinch. Okay, you don't want to dump it. Oh gosh. All right, thank you, honey.
That's that. I'm logging out.
Okay, why don't you go wash your hands?
And log out of ChemKnits.
Okay, fine. Lucas is logged out of ChemKnits, so I will go ahead and finish this up. Oh man. Oh kiddo. Okay. I've saved a little bit. Let's see, we'll check. All right. I did not wait before this flip. The waiting isn't super important. This colorway is very funfetti, very subtle. Yeah, when I say funfetti, because if you think about like the cake mixture and stuff, there's not a ton of pigment in there. And so this is one reason why I was curious about trying out to make my own sprinkles. I'll have a link to that video in the iCard. It'll also be in the description, because that was a lot of fun and you get so much more pigment. But these sprinkles and using shakers like this is a really fun way to play with kids. I think that all of these sprinkles are originally from when I visited Lucas's pre-K class and we dyed yarn there. But all right, I think, you know, there's just a tiny bit left. I'll add this off camera, but then I'll heat this after I've added the rest and checked. I will let it sit for 10 minutes and then we'll try the second colorway that I want to do with. Rather than doing a mixture, we'll layer each color on individually. All right, I am going to remove this and we're gonna add in the other skein that we had set up. But I'm gonna leave a bunch of the warm water in here. The speckles are subtle, but they're pretty. And actually, using these speckles, they're fairly pastel. All right, I'm adding our other skein, which was cold to the warm dye bath. If I need to, I can add some more of that pre-soak water. But now I am going to just start layering on these colors, one on top of another. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and use the shakers. But we will be layering these colors all over. And then comparing this skein to the first one that we dyed. I layered the colors, and yeah, it's a bit different because I'm using the shakers, but I didn't want to open each of the containers and take an aliquot out, and this made it easier for me to layer them on top of each other here. But doing this and seeing how pastel these speckles are compared to the speckles I made myself using sugar and the Wilton Color Right system really got me thinking. So a difference between speckling with a gray acid dye and a black commercial acid dye isn't the intensity of the speckles, but the volume of speckles. So if I were to speckle with black, you would see a lot more specks, and then if I speckled with the gray. And that's because the dye in there is just as concentrated, it's just there's more filler in there that doesn't have pigment. But what if I took a gray stock solution and mixed a couple drops with some sugar or some citric acid? In theory, you could make the dye more dilute potentially, because one dye granule potentially could be diluted more with something like this. This is interesting, and this is something that I will need to explore more in the future. But anyway, now that we've flipped and added color all over this yarn, let's take a look and give some impressions. All right, I added stuff, we moved, and really, I think one big difference is that I think that this one is more pigmented than the first one. I probably should have given Lucas a salt shaker. That would have been really, really fun, but I don't know. I had fun doing this. He wanted to see what I was up to, and so we did this together. And the purple is a bit clogged, which is why I had to take the lid off. But anyway, yeah, I'm gonna leave this to sit. The other main difference here is that these colors are a little more patchy, like especially at the end. Like there's a tiny bit more of that hint of green, some that are more red, some more pink, some sections more yellow, and so that is really the main difference. If you want multicolored speckles but to have more of a uniform feeling, then I think mixing the sprinkles together will help you achieve that. But the differences are subtle, but you'll get a slightly different kind of look by layering them one by one. And so that's just something fun to think about. But anyway, I'm gonna let this sit for 10 minutes and then we'll wait for all the yarn to cool so that way we can wash it. Before I go and wash these pretty sprinkle speckled yarns, I want to show something as contrast. This is the yarn that I created using DIY speckles. I made some yellow, blue, and brown speckles and used a little bit of the orange that I had used over here. But the big thing is just the intensity. Like you can clearly see the contrast even with the yellow speckles here. And when you look closely, you see the speckles here, but it's so much more subtle. So I just wanted to share that comparison before we wash it, because although I recommend sugar sprinkles, for them to really pop, you want a pigmented color like black, and you want, I guess when you're looking at the sprinkles, to see as deep a color as possible to get the most obvious speckles from it. Another thing, I definitely went heavier when I layered the colors one at a time versus using all of them at once. But I was able to go so much heavier because if I accidentally dumped a clump of, say, yellow sprinkles, it would lead to a patch of yellow. But if I accidentally dumped a clump of the multicolored, then it had the potential to create like a muddied spot versus seeing all the individual little hues. So that's one perk of layering versus doing them all together. Now let's wash our yarn. We absolutely need to wash it because, well, we don't want the sugar to stay. But using these sprinkles doesn't result in any kind of crusty feeling because really it is pretty much just sugar. Some other kind of sprinkles can be a bit more challenging to rinse out. So some of the like nonpareils and things like that. So it's worth thinking about the types of sprinkles to use, but the sanding sugar type ones I think are a great choice. I've added some dish soap and I am going to wash this, and well, I guess I'm not going to say until the water runs clear, but I'm going to wash this and then probably rinse it 2 or 3 more times just because of the sugar. But then I will put this yarn through my spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and we'll come back for some conclusions. The differences we see today are really, really subtle. These speckles are really soft. I love the truly random mix that we got from when we combined all of the sprinkles together here. It is beautiful and we just have a nice mix of those colors. But layering the colors on top of each other one at a time was freeing. It really allowed me to go heavier because I wasn't worried about the colors sort of becoming super muddy if I combined them all and they dissolved and spread in one spot. So I was able to go heavier on this yarn. And granted, you know, we see some patches of yellow, a little patch of orange. We still have multicolored speckles in here. It's just different, and over where we had them all mixed together, you truly see all those colors mixed together more evenly spaced. Ooh, we even do see some hints of those yellows. Super subtle, but it is showing up. But, you know, here and being heavier, the balance isn't necessarily as perfect. It doesn't necessarily feel, this feels, they're basically the same, but the differences are super, super subtle. And like over here, you can see we've got a lot more pink. So it's not gonna feel, I don't know. I think that the differences even knit up are gonna be so subtle. And that's because when you pull back, they're pastel. They're very, very pastel. And so you can see that the color over here feels more even, and you see more pink and less pink, just sort of looking at that other skein. That's really the difference. So it would be interesting to play with this experiment using maybe some homemade sprinkles. I haven't done this exact experiment side by side, but homemade sprinkles pack a lot more of a punch. From even zoomed out, you can see the speckles from back here, and you can't really with the homemade or with the commercial sugar sprinkles. And that really is because when you have a sugar cookie, you do not want your mouth to turn bright blue. So if you're making homemade sprinkles, you're not caring about changing your mouth color in the way that I was doing it. So that's why we were able to get something significantly more pigmented than what you see commercially. As for my assistant Lucas from ChemKnits, we'll see if he's available later to film a little bit of a conclusion. It's fun just having my kids around and helping me dye yarn, and I just really enjoy being able to include them in the process as much or as little as they would like. And my younger son is actually starting to show more interest in playing ChemKnits with me. So I expect both of them will be popping in and out of videos over the course of, well, I guess the future. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video. And leave suggestions below. Is there any sprinkle experiment that you would like to see? Let me know and I will add it to my list. Of course, my list, it's a long list, and there's things that I want to do, but for some reason I just haven't gotten to for ages. Like making my own sprinkles, which is coming up, that I keep teasing because it's so amazing. And why didn't I do it sooner? But I do keep track of suggestions, so please leave them below. And if you love the content here and want to support us on another level, go and check out the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. The yarn in the shop is featured in my videos, and well, it's a great win-win-win. You get some beautiful hand-dyed yarn and support the content at the same time. I know I often recommend sugar sprinkles as a counterpoint to Kool-Aid, and they are less pigmented, so it's not really a true dupe, substitution, whatever you might say, but it is something that is easy to find in more locations versus Kool-Aid, so it is fun to play with, and ultimately it's really not that messy, so you know, go give it a shot. Thank you so much for watching.